Good morning. Welcome to day 18 of our journey through Job. Today we are going to cover a few chapters. If you had been wondering how we're going to get to the end of the book of Job by day 21, it's because we're going to fast forward through a few chapters here. And those are chapters 32 through 37. And today we have a surprise guest. We have a new character in the story. And we hadn't seen this character before in all of the book of Job. He has never been mentioned. In fact, we'll see that he's never even acknowledged. And some scholars and theologians and commentaries believe that perhaps this was inserted later. We don't see any interaction, but I think this story tells us, or this character tells us a lot. Not so much in what he says, but what we see as a result. And so we are introduced to the character of Elihu. It's a brand new person. We don't hear of him before, and we see all that we really know about him is he appears to be a younger person who comes in and is really engaged in this debate and gets emotional. And in the midst of what we saw yesterday, Job was going through and he was summarizing his thoughts. He was summarizing his experience. He was summarizing his theology. He was summarizing his argument and his defense. And right when he says, "I'm going to speak no more, my words are concluded," we think, okay, this must be it. He has challenged God himself to respond to him. And we can feel the movement of the story rising, right? Like, this is it. This is the climax of the story. And then all of a sudden this young guy pops on the screen and he's like, "Let me tell you a thing or two." It's quite comical when you look at it that way, that he believes that he should speak up. And isn't that a sign of inexperience, of immaturity, and that we feel compelled to speak even when it's not our turn, even when no one asks us to? Let me put my opinion in here. Let me add to the debate. I think I can do better than you, even though you are wise and have experience. And let me show you the new way. Let me show you what I can do, right? And this is what Elihu is doing here. And he does it for 5 chapters. 5 chapters of Elihu going on and really not saying anything new or adding anything to the debate, just restating in what he thought was a fresh new way to the story or to the debate. And really in 5 chapters or 4 uninterrupted speeches, he takes it upon himself to defend God. His name actually means "He is my God." And so while he has passion and he has intent, we see here that there was no relationship. And we've already seen that when there's no relationship, we can get in big trouble with the knowledge we have because we can't apply it as wisdom. Knowledge without action, right? There had been no interaction. We didn't see Elihu show up and sit with Job in his despair. We didn't see him shiva with him like his other friends did. So really, he had no reason to insert himself other than he felt this indignation, right? He had believed all of the theology that Job's friends had believed before. And so he wasn't defending Job. He wasn't addressing him in compassion. And we'll see that in the text. He was just getting riled up on, basically, if this stuff isn't true, like, what does that mean? His foundation was shaken. What does that mean for my life? And so it was more a concern for himself. Wait a second. These are things you taught me. This is what the elders have shown us. And if you can't defend it, my world is being shaken. Let me give it a try because I need to know what the world is. I need some black and white. And what we've seen in the text of Job is the world isn't always black and white, right? There's a lot of grays. And for a young person, that can be difficult. And so we see Elihu insert himself here. But again, he does not advance the debate. Despite the fact that he speaks for 5 chapters, he doesn't advance the debate at all. What's most notable about chapters 32 through 37 isn't what we see, but it's what we don't. Job never responds to Elihu. Once he had made that decision that he was going to conclude his words and not engage in those things again, he does not respond. And there's a great temptation for Job to respond because Elihu, if you can believe it or not, actually escalates the accusations here. And Job doesn't engage. And it's reminiscent of the Job of the first few chapters that we read about that said that Job turned away from evil. And even though Elihu may have had good intent, we know and he knows now that to engage any further in debate and analysis and to have conversation about it anywhere else but with God wouldn't be productive for him. That it was actually just taking him deeper into a pit of despair. And so we see the return of Job, even though he's been on this journey, even though it turned his world upside down, even though he doubted and worried and debated, he was now returning to what he knew, what he always knew from the beginning, but he had gone off track. He had gone on a wild goose chase. He had chased a rabbit trail, and now he was determined not to engage again. Job has invited God to respond, and he knows now that it is pointless to engage with any other, no matter how passionate, no matter how assured, no matter how inspired it may claim to be. He doesn't react to neither the shame or blame that is tossed at him here. And there's a lot. And he doesn't respond to any accusations or judgment. And there are many in 5 chapters of speeches. In chapter 34 and 35, verse 35, Elihu says this: Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without insight. If only Job were tested to the limit. Basically, he's saying he needs the maximum penalty here because he is off. Because his answers are like those of wicked men. For he adds rebellion to his sin. He scornfully claps in our presence while multiplying his words against God. Oh my goodness. And we'll see throughout the text, if you go through, I just have parts highlighted in which Elihu just makes these strong statements toward Job. He doesn't know him. He doesn't know the story. He just knows what his faith and his foundation have been based on. And so he has personalized Job's story. And now he is he's attacking Job in his words. But Job holds. He holds his ground. He holds his position because he has decided to wait on God. And he's not going to swirl anywhere else. He's not going to swirl in debate anymore. He's not going to swirl with new voices. And the reason I said that he's passionate and assured and inspired is because Elihu claims all these things. He tells them, I'm passionate about God. He tells him, I know this stuff really well. And he tells him even that he's inspired by God himself to come and attack him. And what we need to know is, what is the voice of God? What is it that we should engage in? What is not helpful toward us? And in this moment, Job, even though he had gone into despair and because he had a relationship with his friends, he had entered into conversation. Now he's remembering, you know what? I know better than this. I turn away from evil, and I have to be able to acknowledge and recognize when evil's voice is talking, and that's in blame and shame and accusation and condemnation. And when we hear those words from something or someone or anything, we need to know to turn away from that. Even when our mind itself wants to say, is it because of this or that? If it sounds like blame or shame or accusation or condemnation, we need to know that that's evil, that is not God's voice and that is not God's heart, and to turn away from that. No, thank you, brain. I know that you're trying to protect me, and I'm not going to engage in that. No, thank you, heart. No, thank you, emotions. I know that you want to engage in that because that's the way we've gone before, but I know better now. I know that that doesn't take me anywhere good. And so I'm going to hold my position like Job. I'm going to wait on God. I'm going to stay in this place and dig my heels in and keep my eyes up because I know he's going to answer me. And that's the assurance that we see Job in right now. But in chapter 37, it's not all waste. We see that this man, Elihu, though he is young, his name means he is my God. And so we start to feel the rumbling of the ground. And in chapter 37, we see a glimpse of God's goodness, right? Elihu knows of God. And so the things he's speaking of God are true. And once he gets away from accusing Job, in chapter 37, we see that he starts talking about God's goodness, and that's true, and his greatness, and that's true, and his power, and he equates it to thunderstorms. He says there's an awesome display of the force of nature that only obeys God's command. And so he's pointing us toward, and there's some commentators who believe that Elihu is actually a precursor to, an introduction to, he's taking the mic and saying, hey, everyone, God's on the way. But we know that God doesn't need any introduction. He doesn't need anyone to step in his way and defend him or to introduce him. That God himself will be present, that God can speak for himself, and he will. What we need to do is to know when to wait, what voices are and are not from God, and when we get enticed or tempted to listen to something new, because there's always something new. There's always some new theory. There's always some new debate, new argument, new method that's going to come and present itself as our way to healing that really is just another help. And so we have to take our knowledge and our awareness and our relationship with God and be aware of those things, that when they come, that we do not engage in them, that we don't answer them, that we don't get tempted by them. We can look that way, but what we need to know is when to look away from those things, because it's God's voice that we're waiting for. But I love the verbiage in chapter 37, because it talks about a whirlwind. God thunders wondrously with his voice. He does great things we cannot comprehend. They swirl about. It's talking about the clouds. The clouds swirl about, turning round and round at his direction, accomplishing everything he commands them over the surface of the inhabited world. And on Monday, we hear from God himself, because this is like the buildup. Oh, the wind picked up. Something's about to happen. Something's stirring. And this is what chapter 37 alludes to, that God is showing up. God is about to make a speech and show Job things that are going to bring him peace and are going to answer his questions. And even more than that, well, we'll talk about it on Monday. So your reflection for today is this: are there thoughts, interactions in your life that feel like a storm? God is always at work in our lives. How can you hold your position and wait on God? Where do you see God in the storm of your life? Have you stopped looking? I want to encourage you to keep looking. Hold your ground. He is on his way. He's always present. He has an answer for you.